Hey guys, tonight we re-stepping back into the foggy glow of gaslight and the slow tick of mahogany clocks. To explore a time when sleep was both a luxury and a medical mystery. The curious, candlelit world of Victorian insomnia cures. Picture this year nestled in a lumpy feather bed. Tucked beneath layers of thick wool blankets, your head resting on a slightly musty bolster that's seen better decades. Outside, the sound of iron wheels on cobblestone echoes through soot-stained alleyways. Inside, the air is heavy with the scent of coal smoke, lavender water, and perhaps a lingering hint of laudanum. And you, dear traveler, not getting a wink of sleep, because in 1850s London, sleep isn't just elusive. It's actively discouraged by everything around you. Noise, fashion, medical science, and the very architecture of your house. Frankly, you probably won't survive this week without a very strong cup of nerve tonic and an industrial-strength eye mask made of lead. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, where are you tuning in from tonight? Drop your location and your local time in the comments. I love seeing how far this sleepy little time machine travels. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin your sleepless tour on a crooked London street near Bloomsbury, the gaslights sputtering as horse hooves clatter past. You're staying with your cousin Alfred in a cramped third-floor bedroom above a tailor shop, and from the moment you cross the threshold, you're struck by how oppressively heavy everything feels. The curtains are thick damasks, sewn to block light, but also any movement of air. Your only heat comes from a coal-burning stove that hisses ominously and belches soot like a grumpy dragon. And just to keep things spicy, there's no indoor plumbing, just a porcelain chamber pot tucked modestly behind a folding screen. Your mattress is overstuffed horsehair. Your nightshirt is high-collared flannel. Your pillow smells suspiciously of damp mildew and eau de mothball. Victorian bedrooms, while often beautiful, were masterclasses in bad ventilation. Windows were rarely opened. Doctors still debated whether fresh air caused illness or cured eye tan. Insulation was minimal. The only sounds more persistent than the ticking of your bedside clock are the upstairs. Neighbor S. Gowdy, pacing in the endless bark of a street dog who, much like you, simply refuses to sleep. And yet, paradoxically, this was also a golden age of sleep ideals. Middle and upper-class Victorians were obsessed with the notion of proper rest. Sleep was moral. Sleep was orderly. Sleep was scheduled, preferably for 7 hours, precisely between 10 o'clock p.m. and 5 o'clock a.m., like you're some sort of human grandfather clock. You're not. Instead, you toss, you turn, you briefly consider crying, and then you do what every insomniac in 1850s London would do. You light a candle, pour yourself a cup of night tea, which ironically contains more caffeine than coffee, and reach for a household guidebook with a title like The Domestic Oracle, containing valuable advice on slumber, flatulence, and marital disputes. One such guide, printed in 1852, recommends gently massaging your temples with a mixture of vinegar and burnt sugar. Another encourages you to press a warm iron against your feet while chanting the Lord's Prayer in reverse. Yet another suggests a walk to clear the spleen, though there is absolutely no agreement on what your spleen is or what it does. Historians still argue whether these home remedies were genuinely believed or simply passed down as rituals of comfort placebo over practicality. What's clear is that people were trying and failing, because even when you did fall asleep, there was no guarantee you'd stay that way. Many Victorians experienced biphasic sleep, a first slumber from around 9 p.m. to 1 a.m., followed by a wakeful hour or two before dozing off again until dawn. You lying awake in the middle of the night might write letters, stoke the fire, or if you're particularly adventurous, read a copy of the Illustrated Police News by candlelight, scaring yourself into even deeper insomnia with tales of grave robbers and exploding chimneys. And if you're poor, forget feather beds and velvet curtains. Your bedroom might be a cot under a workbench or a bench in a crowded lodging house. You'll fall asleep to the lullaby of coughing laborers, creaking floorboards, and the distant clank of someone emptying a night bucket into the street. But tonight, your middle class should be asleep. And so, at 3 o'clock a.m., You slip on a shawl and descend the creaking stairs. The kitchen is dark and smells faintly of boiled beef. You find the tin of sleep lozenges hidden behind the tea caddy. The label boasts valerian, camphor, and a gentle hint of belladonna. Nothing says bedtime like a little floral poison. You chew one slowly. It tastes like soap and sadness. But within 15 minutes, your eyelids begin to droop. Perhaps it's working, or perhaps it's just the psychological relief of doing anything to calm your nerves. Inside, the gas lights hiss their final breaths. The dog has stopped barking. Even the gouty neighbor seems to have surrendered to the night. You return to your room, slide under the woolen layers, and lie perfectly still. Just as sleep begins to stretch its fingers toward you, your cousin Alfred snores, loudly. With operatic commitment, welcome to the Victorian night. You wake with a start. Or, more accurately, you don't wake because you never fully slept. Your eyes have simply adjusted to the endless twilight of gaslight peeking through heavy curtains. And now your brain has quietly decided to surrender. You blink at the ceiling where a patch of damp has begun to resemble Queen Victoria. If you squint just right, the room is stifling and your head is pounding not. From last night's sleep lozenge, probably, but from the sheer lack of oxygen. Because in your noble quest for rest, you've sealed yourself in a decorative coffin of Victorian good taste. Let's talk about your bedroom, specifically how it's trying to murder you. Everything here is designed with aesthetics in mind and almost nothing for actual health. The windows, as we've noted, are rarely opened. Fresh air is for the working classes and wild animals. Ventilation systems are either non-existent or decorative. Some homes do feature air bricks, but no one seems to know if they help or just invite in curious pigeons. Coal fires, though cozy, fill the room with fumes and soot. The Victorians, bless them. Haven Tea yet made the mental leap that sleeping and slowly accumulating carbon monoxide might interfere with their dreams. The prevailing wisdom: if your nose isn't tingling with coal dust, your room isn't warm enough. And the bed, oh the bed. Four-poster, canopy. Draped in velvet and embroidered linen, looks regal, romantic even. But inside, it's a heat trap. No airflow, no movement. The mattress is stuffed with horsehair, which is durable and excellent at storing every sneeze-inducing particle from the past 30 years. You lie in it like a formaldehyde-marinated beetle, slowly stewing in your own regret. There's no central heating, so in winter, people sleep fully clothed. Yes, including nightcaps, socks, and occasionally gloves, which might sound charming until you remember you're also wearing flannel pajamas. Buttoned up to your clavicle and lying under 3 woolen layers that collectively weigh more than your Uncle Harold. Your pillow, naturally, is stuffed with duck down, but 1 duck too many. It's overstuffed to the point that your neck bends at a 45-degree angle like you re-preparing for whiplash. You consider flipping it, only to discover that the other side is somehow colder and slightly damp. Even the lighting doesn't help. Victorian households often relied on candles or gas lamps for evening light, both of which cast a flickering glow that plays tricks on your sleepy mind. Shadows stretch strangely. The curtains move as if someone's just behind them. A coat rack in the corner transforms into a lurking figure. Historians still argue whether these unsettling visuals contributed to the prevalence of night terrors. In spiritual visitations reported in the period, or if people were simply experiencing what we now call sleep paralysis, while wrapped in 6 layers of wool and guilt. If you're wealthy enough to afford gaslight piped into your room, congratulations. You've traded one hazard for another. Gas leaks were common and could either lull you into permanent sleep or leave you with one eye twitching for the next fortnight. Still, the gentle hiss of the gas valve can be oddly soothing, like a deadly lullaby. Now, let's not forget the role of noise. Your Victorian street is alive and loud well into the night. Cobblestones amplify every wheel, hoof, and drunken declaration of love. There's no double glazing. There's barely single glazing. Sound drifts in like a curious guest and stays for hours. And if you're near a factory or tannery, forget about it. Machinery clanks on into the early morning. Meanwhile, stray cats yowl melodramatically as if auditioning for Hamlet. You briefly wonder whether moving to the countryside might help. After all, the Romantic poets seemed very into that sort of thing. Fields, moonlight, the gentle bleating of distant sheep. But country life brings its own trials. Drafty stone cottages, scratchy straw mattresses, and geese. Always geese. Loud, vindictive geese. Back in London, your bedroom may be grand in appearance, but it's little more than a smothering sarcophagus of good intentions. Still, you do what every Victorian sleeper does. You adapt. You begin to sleep upright in a chair some nights, wrapped in a shawl, feet near the fire. Others swear by sleeping with a lemon under the pillow to ward off night vapors. You try it. It smells nice, but you still wake up at 2:13 a.m., staring at the patch of damp, now resembling a mildly disappointed Prince Albert. There are stranger practices, too. Some people place cold cabbage leaves on their foreheads. Others tie red string around their ankles. One particularly memorable entry in a household manual recommends placing a carved walnut under your left armpit to soothe the lunar nerves. Science, it turns out, is still catching up. You begin to envy the servants. Yes, they sleep in cramped attic rooms and rise before dawn, but at least they seem to sleep, snoring gently in narrow cots, their minds blissfully free of the obligation to perform nightly hygiene rituals, involving borax foot baths and lemon-scented hair tonic. You, however, remain in your cocoon of upper-middle-class sleeplessness, pondering your next move. Perhaps tomorrow you'll write to a doctor, or try a vinegar foot wrap, or simply stand in the garden at midnight, barefoot in the frost, waiting for inspiration or a mild case of pneumonia. One way or another, this bedroom has made a philosopher of you. So next morning, or what passes for morning in your sleepless fog, and you shuffle down the stairs in your dressing gown, leery-eyed, with the distinct sense that your brain has been replaced by damp toast.
Alfred!
Your cousin and reluctant sleep mentor sips his chicory coffee with unnerving alertness. You look like you've been up fighting ghosts, he says. You grimace. He offers no help beyond suggesting you write to a man about it. So you do? You pen a polite letter to Dr. Winthrop Dunsley, esteemed physician and member of the Royal Society of something or other. Dr. Dunsley specializes in nervous conditions, digestive disorders, and disturbances of the nightly equilibrium. Translation: he treats people who can't sleep, can't eat, or can't stop worrying about either. 3 days later, you're ushered into his study. The room smells of polished oak, carbolic acid, and the soft menace of medical optimism. Books line the shelves, some genuine, some decorative. A framed lithograph of Galen scowls down at you from above the mantel. He peers at you through gold spectacles and makes a few humming noises. After a brief exchange involving your sleep patterns, digestion, and whether you've recently suffered an injury to the spleen or moral sense, Dr. Dunsley nods solemnly. Ah, yes, a classic case of nocturnal agitation of the viscera, he declares. This is where things take a turn. Dr. Dunsley prescribes a custom tonic, a bitter tincture of valerian root, chloral hydrate, a bit of camphor, and, to your mild horror, a trace of arsenic. It's quite safe in small quantities, he assures you, stirring it gently with a silver spoon. Marvelously effective. You'll drift off like a feather on a still lake. To your surprise, this is not considered an extreme prescription. The Victorian pharmacopoeia is a strange garden, lush with substances that today would earn a hazmat label. Doctors reached for mercury, opium, ether, and strychnine with the same casual frequency that modern physicians reach for aspirin. Historians still argue whether these treatments were genuinely helpful. It's utterly harmful, or somewhere in the hazy narcotic middle. After all, if your patient is unconscious, have you not technically cured their insomnia? You take the tonic home. The bottle is amber glass, with a cork stopper and an elegantly lettered label. You stare at it for an hour before taking a sip. It burns. It definitely tastes like it contains arsenic. But half an hour later, the tension in your jaw softens. Your breath slows. Your body becomes wonderfully heavy, as if your bones have decided to sink a few inches closer to the mattress. And for the first time in a week, you fall asleep. Deep, dreamless sleep. Until you wake up at 4 o'clock a.m. with a ringing in your ears, a dry throat, and a sudden craving for cold potatoes. You are calm, but also mildly poisoned, as you realize progress. The Victorian medical community is rife with men like Dr. Dunsley, respectable, whiskered, and mildly dangerous. Some champion the use of bromides, which are sedating, but risk making your entire body feel like boiled cabbage. Others promote belladonna, extracted from the deadly nightshade plant, claiming it soothes the cerebral unrest. It also dilates your pupils and makes you hallucinate frogs wearing waistcoats. Still others lean into opium-based concoctions, sold under names like Mrs. Winslow's Soothing Syrup or Dr. Godfrey's Cordial. These are available without prescription, often laced with alcohol and morphine, and marketed as safe for infants. The elderly and hysterical women. Your neighbor, a spinster named Miss Prattlewaite, swears by her nightly dose of laudanum tea, which she drinks while crocheting lace doilies and muttering softly to her cat Algernon. She insists it's just enough to take the edge off. Algernon, for his part, seems permanently stunned. It's difficult to resist the temptation of these ready-made, softly lethal solutions. After all, no one wants to lie awake, staring at the ceiling while their joints ache and their mind lists every regret since 1837. So you begin to dabble. A little tonic here, a drop of tincture there. You become your own apothecary. Mixing, measuring, sipping, waiting. The rituals are oddly comforting. You feel like a monk preparing for some ancient rite. There's a strange elegance in the process, even if it does occasionally end with you dreaming of flying parasols or forgetting your own middle name for a few hours. You're not alone in this. Insomnia was fashionable among certain social circles, associated with intelligence, creativity, or delicate nerves. The poet who can't sleep is romantic. The widow who paces at midnight is tragic. The barrister who tosses until dawn is clearly overburdened by noble thought. Still, fashion aside, your goal remains sleep. Honest, ordinary, 8 or so blessedly sleep. And every few nights, when the dosage is just right, and the air is cool, and the gas lights outside flicker like distant fireflies, you achieve it. Not deep restorative rest, perhaps, but a gentle drift into the fog. A kind of nap with ambition. Even if you do wake up with slightly dilated pupils and the taste of tin in your mouth, by now, you've tried the tonics. You've flirted with arsenic. You've dabbled, perhaps, too enthusiastically in laudanum. And yet sleep continues to tease you, slipping just out of reach like a well-mannered ghost at a Victorian. So tonight you find yourself wrapped in a borrowed shawl, trudging across London to a small clinic in the district of Marylebone. Word on the gaslit street is that Dr. Alabaster Fincha, former naval surgeon turned sleep specialist, has developed a new method for insomnia that doesn't involve narcotics or spiritual confession. No, this method is ... wetter. Welcome to the wonderful world of hydrotherapy, the belief that water, applied with intent and mild aggression, can cure practically anything. You are shown into a tiled room that smells sharply of vinegar, wet linen, and something faintly medicinal. A tub sits at the center, large porcelain, and disturbingly deep. Dr. Finch enters. A brisk man with impressive sideburns, and the energy of someone who bathes 4 times a day for science. Insomnia, he declares, is often the result of an overheated brain. We must cool the furnace of the mind. This is how you find yourself submerged in icy water at 9 o'clock at night, clutching the rim of the tub while a nurse gently pats your forehead with a cloth soaked in bay leaf and turpentine. Hydrotherapy was enormously popular among the more health-obsessed Victorians. Patients were wrapped in cold sheets, doused with buckets, or plunged into baths for precise durations. Sometimes, for variation, hot water was used instead, followed by cold water. And then back again. It was a bit like training to be a salmon. Historians still debate whether these treatments offered real physical benefits or simply served as elaborate distractions. Certainly by the time you're dried off, red-faced, and swaddled in a warm flannel cocoon, you're too exhausted not to fall asleep. But that's just the beginning. Dr. Finch's clinic also offers a variety of other sleep-enhancing marvels. Your personal favorite, the brain-cooling helmet. Picture it, a gleaming metal cap, something between a colander and a knight's helm, strapped gently around your skull. Inside, a chamber circulates icy water, drawing heat away from the head. The result, Finch assures you, is a lullaby of thermal rebalancing. It's heavy, it drips, and it makes you look like you've lost a duel with a soup tureen. But you can't deny its effect. After 15 minutes, you feel oddly serene. The weight of the helmet presses you downward in the best possible way, as if sleep is less of a destination and more of a gravitational force. Finch is also a great believer in mustard plasters pastes, made of mustard seed. Flour and vinegar spread across the chest to stimulate circulation and reduce nocturnal congestion. These are warm, slightly itchy, and leave your bedroom smelling like a disreputable sandwich shop. You try one. It tingles. You're not sure whether you're falling asleep or slowly cooking. There are also blistering agents, little jars of salves meant to raise mild skin welts to draw out the wakeful humors. And there's one infamous technique: placing leeches behind the ears to relieve cranial pressure. Finch claims it works wonders, but you draw the line at nocturnal bloodletting. You may be tired, but you're not that tired. Still, not all methods are so aggressive. One growing trend involves tactile distraction. Patients are encouraged to wear garments with elaborate textures, embroidered cuffs, velvet sashes, silk-lined gloves, and gently stroke these fabrics until they drift off. The theory: the body's attention is diverted from racing thoughts to pleasant sensations. You try it? It works until you realize you've spent 20 minutes caressing your own elbow like an over-affectionate cat. One particularly curious device resembles a music box with bellows. You wind it up, and it emits a soft, rhythmic whooshing sound, meant to mimic ocean waves or a sleeping dog. It's oddly calming end, till the mechanism hiccups and emits a metallic squeal loud enough to wake a medium from a trance. But these inventions reflect a deeper shift, a growing sense that sleep might not be just a matter of medicine, but mechanics that rest could be engineered, structured, and maybe even purchased. This mechanization is especially appealing to the rising middle class. After all, nothing says modern sophistication like a bed frame that tilts slightly to align with lunar gravity or a pillow infused with hops and menthol. You meet one gentleman who swears by his perforated copper nightshirt designed to promote dermal aeration. He also hasn't blinked in 3 days. Hydrotherapy, in its gentler forms, becomes a popular home remedy. Mothers sponge their children with cool lavender water before bed. Clerks soak their feet in shallow tin tubs while reading about railway mergers. You begin a nightly routine of warm compresses followed by a brisk towel whipping. Yes, that's a thing, and for a brief moment, you start to feel like a civilized being again. Until, of course, you overhear your neighbor discussing a new treatment involving electrically charged foot baths. And you wonder if perhaps we've taken the water theme just a bit too far. Still, among all the tinctures and contraptions, there's something soothing in the act of ritual. Each method, no matter how absurd, requires time, intention, and a belief that rest is possible. That's powerful in a world that seems increasingly allergic to sleep. Tonight, you curl up beneath your 5-layer bedding fortress, scalp tingling from your last mustard application, a faint herbal scent wafting from the towel on your forehead. Outside, the city hums on. But for now, your heartbeat slows, your mind quiets. Sleep creeps in, not as a sudden drop, but a slow tide rising. Just ... don't roll over onto the leech jar. You awaken to the gentle chime of a neighbor's breakfast bell, the scent of scorched toast, drifting up from the kitchen below. Another Victorian day, another night, only mostly sleepless. But you're getting used to this twilight state, where dreams nibble at the edges of your thoughts but never quite bite. As you sip tepid tea and contemplate your increasingly experimental bedtime routine, a curious realization dawns. Not everyone is losing sleep the same way. In fact, who you are in Victorian society largely determines how you're allowed or expected to experience insomnia. And that, dear traveler, is how you find yourself examining the strange, striped wallpaper of gendered sleeplessness. Let's begin with the ladies. Victorian England, a sleepless woman was often labeled nervous, sensitive, or if the diagnosis came with an especially expensive invoice, suffering from neurasthenia. This mysterious condition, coined by American doctors, but adopted enthusiastically across the Atlantic, encompassed everything from anxiety to low energy to difficulty sleeping. It was also blamed for a wide range of complaints, including unladylike thoughts, excessive daydreaming, and heaven forbid creative ambition. Women were said to be particularly vulnerable to the overstimulation of modern life. Trains, novels, lace production, sewing machine use. Even reading in bed was suspect. Doctors warned that it might overexcite the imagination and lead to, what exactly? Vivid dreams? Independent thinking? Scandalous preference for poetry over housework? Historians still argue whether diagnoses like neurasthenia and female hysteria were genuine medical responses, or convenient labels for behavior society found inconvenient. Either way, The cure almost always involves sleep deep, restorative, preferably unconscious for several hours at a time. Which is ironic, given that women, especially wives, mothers, and maids, had the least chance of actually achieving it. Picture a respectable middle-class wife. She manages the household, supervises the servants, sews her children's frocks, and attends social calls, all while maintaining the delicate emotional poise expected of a good Christian woman. By nightfall, she's so tightly wound that even lavender water and a good crying session can coax her into slumber. So, what's the cure? Often, it's rest therapy, a regimen that includes long periods of bed rest, warm milk, and the suppression of all strong opinions. Some women are even sent to rest homes in the countryside, where they're forbidden from writing, reading, or talking too much. One notable sufferer, Charlotte Perkins Gilman, would later write the yellow wallpaper as a chilling response to such treatment. Spoiler, it didn't help. Then there's the corset problem. Try sleeping in one. Actually don't. But Victorian women often did either because they were too exhausted to remove it, or because society deemed it improper to appear even slightly disheveled, even in their own bedrooms. The result? Restricted breathing, compressed organs, and an intense, unrelenting discomfort that's somehow blamed on the woman for being too delicate. Let's not forget menstruation, either a topic so taboo that it was almost mystical. Many doctors advised complete bed rest during that time of the month, assuming women to be temporarily possessed by lunar forces. Naturally, sleep was recommended, but if you happened to wake in the night with cramps, no remedy was offered other than clutching a hot brick and reciting proverbs. Now, shift your attention to the gentlemen. Victorian men were supposed to be rational, sturdy, and untroubled by such fripperies as nerves. But insomnia, that was different. Sleeplessness in men, particularly upper-class intellectuals and civil servants, was framed not as weakness, but as a sign of greatness. Can't sleep. You must be burdened with thoughts, important ones. Lawyers, scholars, engineers, many prided themselves on their long, wakeful hours. Some kept journals of their sleepless nights, viewing them as quiet opportunities for self-reflection or impromptu brilliance. Others blamed their insomnia on excess of mental labor or over-application of the faculties. It's never on the 6 cups of black tea and the late-night cigar. Of course, not all gentlemen found it noble. Some were genuinely distressed waking, at 3 a.m., in cold sweats, terrified of missing a train, losing their fortune, or forgetting Latin declensions. These men might visit a physician, but rather than being told to rest, they were often instructed to exercise. Work the body to rest the mind, went the thinking. So you see them at dawn, pacing around parks, doing calisthenics in the parlor, or performing vigorous limb-flinging routines prescribed by Swedish gymnasts. It's all very dignified until someone pulls a muscle doing a forward bend in full cravat and spats. Then there are those who turn inward, meditating, journaling, even experimenting with dietary cures. One pamphlet recommends cold mutton before bed. Another a concoction of egg yolk, rum, and cinnamon. None of it works. But the sense of control it gives them is enough to stave off despair. Still, even the stoic Victorian gentleman had his breaking point, and when tea and calisthenics failed, he too would turn to the apothecary's door and ask quietly, of course for a discreet sleeping draught. As for the working classes, we'll get to them later. For now, let's just say their insomnia wasn't romanticized. It was ignored. Back in your room, you reflect on all of this. You are tired, certainly. But you are also aware that your struggle is not just chemical or environmental, but cultural. That the architecture of sleep in this era is built not only of bricks and bed springs, but of expectations and etiquette and deeply gendered ideas of what rest should look like. And so you lie back, hands folded, corset-free, thank heavens, and try not to think too hard. That's the most radical act of all. You've now tasted every respectable sleep tonic in the cabinet. You've sat patiently in cold water. You've endured mustard plasters, moral judgment, and more velvet than any human should ever be exposed to. And yet you still wake up at strange hours, with your heart tapping out Morse code against your ribs. So, naturally, someone suggests you try bleeding. Not metaphorically, not spiritually, literally. It begins innocently enough. A gentleman at a dinner party notices the bags under your eyes and between bites of mutton leans in conspiratorially. You may have an excess of blood, he says, as if discussing the weather. Very common in the nervous type. This throws off the humors. Have you considered a nice leeching? Welcome to the darker side of Victorian medicine, or if you don't know what's wrong with the patient. Step 1 is to let something out. Blood, bile, energy, hope. Your first appointment is with Dr. Archibald Nethers, a quiet man with pale hands and an office that smells faintly of iron and overcooked beets. He asks you a few questions, mostly about your sleeping habits, dreams, and the color of your tongue. Then he nods solemnly. Yes, he whispers, as if delivering a eulogy. Your blood is
active.
He recommends light depletion, which translated from Latin and mumbled euphemism means we're going to poke you and drain you like a sad wineskin. You lie on a fainting couch, while Dr. Nethers gently ties a tourniquet around your upper arm. He selects a small curved blade from a case lined in velvet. It's alarmingly shiny. You do your best not to faint before he even begins. The first sensation is surprisingly mild, a pinch, a warmth. Then the strange tickle of blood dripping into a little porcelain bowl. Bleeding was once the go-to cure for just about everything. Fevers, melancholy, gout, and yes, insomnia. The theory was based on balancing the four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Too much of one, especially blood, was thought to overstimulate the body and disturb sleep, so let it out. Easy fix. Historians still argue whether Victorian physicians truly believed in this ancient system, or whether it lingered more out of inertia than conviction. What's clear is that it remained stubbornly fashionable, especially among those who thought sleep could be restored through sheer subtraction. Dr. Nethers assures you the procedure has been modernized. No wild gushing, no ornate lancets from medieval illustrations, just a few ounces. You'll feel lighter, he promises. And in truth, you do. Whether from blood loss or placebo, your limbs tingle and your mind quiets. You go home, collapse into bed, and sleep for 6 hours without waking. Of course, you also wake up pale, dizzy, and craving something salty. But you slept, and that counts as victory. Leeches, to make a curious appearance in this chapter of history. Less gruesome than cutting, and often used in more delicate areas behind the ears. On the temples, even the base of the spine, they were beloved by doctors seeking gentler ways to draw the heat downward. You're invited to a small salon gathering hosted by Lady Henrietta Culpeper, who swears by her personal leech therapist. Yes, that's a thing. You arrive to find half a dozen women reclining on chaise lounges with decorative shawls draped tastefully over their shoulders and small, glistening leeches stuck behind their ears. It's like a warm tickle, Lady Culpeper assures you. And afterwards, I always sleep like a tombstone. You hesitate, then allow the therapist to place a single leech on your wrist. It feels ... odd, not painful, more like the world's wettest paperclip. The creature feeds, detaches, and is promptly rehomed in a little glass jar labeled Tuesday's Patient. You go home and once again you sleep. Not deeply, not soundly, but long enough that your thoughts don't sound like clanging kettles in the morning. Of course, not all methods are so biologically invasive. Some physicians lean toward vital energy redirection, which involves pressing on certain pressure points to draw restlessness away from the brain and toward the limbs. It's a bit like acupuncture, minus the needles and with a lot more earnest squinting. Others embrace cupping therapy, placing heated glass cups along your back to raise red welts. It's supposed to increase circulation, releasing stagnant blood. You try it once. It looks dramatic. Leaves round bruises like you've been attacked by polite octopi, and yet it does make your shoulders feel looser. One pamphlet you find in a second-hand shop recommends binding the wrists lightly with silk cords, claiming that gently restricting the outward flow of nerve energy helps inward repose. You test this theory. Your sleep doesn't improve, but you do develop a taste for peculiar fashion accessories. There is something vaguely theatrical about all of it, the way the treatments walk the line between healing and performance. Bloodletting is a ritual. Cupping is a display. Even the act of complaining about your sleeplessness becomes a kind of currency in polite society. You meet one gentleman who claims to bleed himself once a month just to keep the nerves in check. He offers to lend you his favorite lancet. You politely decline. Not everyone approves of these methods, of course. Some critics, particularly within the emerging natural medicine movement, denounce bloodletting as barbaric and ineffective. Better to drink chamomile and breathe deeply, they say. But when you're on your sixth night of fragmented dreams and half-formed thoughts, chamomile starts to sound like an underachiever. So you lie in bed again tonight, a folded bandage on your forearm, your thoughts drifting through the haze of remedies and rituals. The bleeding is done. The leeches have feasted. Your humors, presumably, are now in cosmic alignment. And if not, well, there's always mustard powder. Tonight, your room smells faintly of peppermint oil and regret. You've burned through the medical options, nearly bled yourself respectable, and worn a leech like a sleepy badge of honor. So when your cousin Alfred suggests you try something more cultural, you don't argue. You're desperate. He hands you a small leather-bound book titled The Harmonious Bedchamber, a guide to musical respite. Yes. Tonight, you're venturing into the world of sound-based sleep cures. The Victorians, ever the experimenters in both art and agony, were fascinated by the idea that music-or, carefully curated noise could lull the body into rest. Sound as medicine, rhythm as remedy. Forget morphine. This was about Mozart. The theory was simple. If the human body responds to vibrations, then the right tones might soothe frazzled nerves and retune the soul. Like winding a clock, one pamphlet explained. The mind, once struck off-key, must be set again with harmony. The practice, however, was anything but simple. Your first foray involves a wax cylinder and an early phonograph, a bulky, crank-powered contraption that Alfred insists only squeals a little when it starts. He sets it beside your bed, winds the handle, and places the needle. You expect a lullaby. Instead, you hear what might be a cello being digested. To be fair, it's the machine's fault, not the composer's. These early recordings are scratchy, warbly, and prone to sounding like someone trying to hum through a colander. Still, there is something oddly charming in the imperfections, a sense that the sound is fighting to reach you from across time. The piece is slow, somber, almost mournful. A nocturne, perhaps. It drapes itself over the room like a heavy velvet curtain. The notes don't put you to sleep exactly, but they blur the edges of your thoughts. And sometimes, that's enough. Victorians took this idea further with live music for sleep hygiene. In wealthier homes, it became fashionable to hire musicians to play soft sonatas in the evening, especially for women of nervous disposition. Picture a half-dozen harpists in pastel waistcoats, gently plucking while Lady Beatrix reclines under an embroidered blanket and contemplates the ceiling. You're not quite that extravagant. But Alfred finds a pamphlet about resonant furniture and insists you try a vibratory sleep chair. Yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. The device resembles an overbuilt armchair with a hidden mechanism inside. You sit. A crank is turned. And the chair begins to tremble not violently, but with a steady, purring hum, like a cat that swallowed a music box. The goal is to dislodge wakeful energy from the spine. You're not sure what that means? But you are sure your teeth are gently clicking together as your body buzzes like a softly haunted cello. Surprisingly, it's not unpleasant. The rhythm becomes hypnotic, and within minutes, your limbs go slack. Your mind drifts. You nearly fall asleep in the chair, which would be a first. But this isn't just about music. Ambient soundscapes are another Victorian curiosity. Some households mimic the natural world. Indoor fountains, potted palms rustling under ceiling fans, even tiny sand gardens that sing when combed with ivory rakes. The idea is to simulate peace through artifice. You meet a young botanist who swears by the sound of bees. Not actual bees, he's recorded the buzzing and plays it on a loop beside his bed. It reminds me of summer, he says wistfully, eyes twitching from what may be residual sting trauma. There are more abstract approaches, too. One composer creates pieces based on the pulse of the universe. He measures tides, translates them into rhythms, and performs them on a custom-built glass harmonica. The resulting music is eerie, crystalline, and unnervingly similar to the sound of sleep paralysis, demons arranging furniture. Historians still argue whether these sonic therapies were genuinely therapeutic or simply elaborate distractions. But one cannot deny their intentionality, every note, every hum, kind of protest against the tyranny of the overactive brain. Of course, there are skeptics. One critic famously mocked the movement, writing, "If music be the food of sleep, then some compositions are as digestible as boiled boots. Still, you persist. You try humming lullabies to yourself. You sing psalms softly into your pillow. You listen to your neighbor's parlor recitals through the wall half, a piano concerto muffled by wallpaper and scandal. And strangely, the routine becomes comforting. One night you experiment with your own sounds, a wind-up music box tucked into your nightstand. Its tune is crooked, slightly off, but gentle. You wind it, let it play, let it carry you somewhere just far enough away. And maybe that's the magic. Not perfect notes or expert orchestration, but the quiet insistence that something is happening. That sound is guiding you through the dark like a sleepy boatman with a creaky oar. That night, you dream barely, but you do, of a concert held in the clouds. Every musician dressed in nightgowns. The harpist yawns between chords. The conductor wears earmuffs. You wake up smiling. Maybe you think sleep is less a destination than a duet between your breathing, and the strange lullabies the world offers when you stop demanding they make sense. Tonight, your plan is simple. No potions, no vibrations, no experimental upholstery. Just rest. Honest, untheatrical, maybe even boring rest. But as you tuck yourself beneath your covers and shift once, twice, thrice, you already feel the tickle of unease crawling back into your bones. So you abandon the bed once again, clutching a shawl and a candle stub, and pace slowly toward the parlor, where Alfred has left out a curious book titled Domestic Sleep Practices of the Empire. What unfolds in those yellowing pages is not another remedy, but a revelation. You, dear reader, are not the center of the insomnia universe. The Victorians may be wringing their hands in drawing rooms and applying smelling salts to the sleepless gentry. But across the empire, beyond its reach, people are sleeping in ways the Queen herself might find deeply unladylike. You begin to read about polyphasic sleep, still common in many rural parts of the world. Sleep here is not a single long stretch under an embroidered coverlet, but a fragmented series of naps, one after dusk, another before dawn, and maybe a third after the midday meal. In Mediterranean villages, people retire early, rise for 2 hours in the dead of night to pray or bake bread, then return to sleep until morning. In parts of rural India, farmers take short rests on rope-woven charpots under trees during the hottest part of the day. And across West Africa, entire households drift in and out of sleep communally, with rhythms attuned more to the sounds of drums or wind than to clocks or curfews. Victorian science, of course, prefers a stricter model. 8 hours in one go. Ideally beginning at 10 o'clock and ending with the sun. Anything less is viewed as moral failure or mental illness. Historians still debate whether this rigidity was a product of industrialization or Protestant guilt or both. But it's clear that the world before factory bells and rail timetables was far more relaxed about when and how people slept. You discover a particularly fascinating practice among Inuit communities of the Arctic. Sleep cycles are adapted entirely to the changing light. During the long winter dark, people sleep more, sometimes up to 14 hours. In the summer, they might sleep only a few hours per night, napping when needed. Sleep when you're tired, goes the logic. Revolutionary. And in Japan, even today, there's a cultural tradition of inamir, the art of dozing off while still appearing socially engaged. You read of merchants sleeping upright on benches, students napping in the corners of libraries, workers taking quick rests on tatami mats in the back of shops. Sleep there isn't shameful. It's respected, integrated. In many cultures, dreams are not just idle nighttime nonsense, but active spiritual terrain. Among some indigenous Australian groups, the dreaming is an essential framework for understanding life, ancestry, and land. Aymara farmers interpret dreams communally, often discussing their meanings over breakfast. In Ghana, dreams are shared and analyzed with community elders as a form of social and emotional hygiene. Back in England, your dreams are yours alone, unless you're unlucky enough to mention them, in which case they may be labeled as signs of madness or indulgence. Still, not all Victorian minds are closed. You come across the writings of Edward Burne-Jones, the pre-Raphaelite painter, who notes that he often sleeps twice per night, once from 9 p.m. to midnight, then again from 2 to 6 a.m., filling the interim with sketching and tea. The night is a kingdom of thought, he wrote. Why surrender it entirely to unconsciousness? You think of your own waking hours in the middle of the night. The calm, eerie hush, the flickering lamplight, the strange clarity that comes from being the only person awake on your street. Maybe, just maybe, that wakefulness isn't an enemy. Maybe it's a visitor, one who arrives bearing quiet if not sleep. So, tonight, you experiment. You lie down at dusk, under your heavy quilts, and let yourself drift. You don't fight the wake up at midnight. You simply rise, light a candle, and write a few lines in your journal. The mind doesn't sleep when the city does. You scribble. It only walks softer. You stretch, sip water, read a few pages from your new favorite book on Egyptian dream interpretation. Then, like a practiced villager from the Levant or a silk trader in Samarkand, you lie back down. And this time, you sleep deeper. There's comfort in knowing that insomnia, while unpleasant, is not unnatural. That across cultures and centuries, people have made peace with fractured nights. That your frustration is, in its own strange way, part of a global conversation, a whisper across time from others who, too, stared at ceilings and wondered what to do with the dark. Maybe the Victorians had it wrong in trying to outwit sleep. Maybe sleep is less of a conquest than a courtship, something that arrives when invited, not dragged into the room like an unwilling dinner guest. Tonight your dreams wander. You're walking down a Persian road under moonlight. A fox is sleeping on a rug beside you. A woman hums a lullaby in a language you don't recognize, and still somehow you understand every word. You wake at sunrise not because you've been startled, but because, for once, your sleep ends naturally. You sit up slowly, blinking at the pale yellow light, the edge of a half-forgotten dream still clinging to your skin like damp lace. You stretch, your bones creak, but your mind feels quiet. For the first time in weeks, perhaps, it's not shouting at you. And yet you wonder, what is this mysterious process that overtakes you each night, or fails to? You decide to consult an expert, not a doctor this time, but a philosopher of sleep. One of those curious Victorian figures who hover between science, mysticism, and outright poetry. Dr. Clement Forsyth receives you in a candlelit study that smells of ink, cedarwood, and old lemons. He wears a velvet smoking jacket and keeps a live owl on a perch beside the fireplace. You are unsure whether to curtsy or salute. Sleep, he intones, is not simply the absence of waking. It is its own country. And with that, you fall into an entirely new kind of exploration. Victorians had a peculiar relationship with the philosophy and science of dreams. On one hand, sleep was viewed as a biological necessity. On the other, it was a portal one that might lead to heaven, madness, or insight. Theories abounded. One school of thought held that sleep was a state in which the soul temporarily left the body to frolic in unknown realms. Dreams, Dr. Forsyth explains, are merely the postcards it sends back. Another, more medical perspective posited that dreams were simply the echoes of digestion, blood flow, and bodily disturbance. If you dreamt of falling, it was because your blood pressure had dipped. If you dreamt of running, perhaps your legs were twitching beneath the covers. The body, as always, was trying to tell you something and doing so through interpretive dance. Then there were the mesmerists. Mesmerism, or animal magnetism, promised not only healing, but control over sleep itself. Practitioners would use hand movements, pendulums, or direct eye contact to guide subjects into deep trance-like states, what we might now call hypnosis. Some believed it could be used to induce perfect sleep. Others hoped it would unlock access to a higher consciousness. You attend a mesmerist demonstration, purely out of curiosity. A man in a dark cloak waves his hands before a young lady's face until her eyelids flutter and she slumps back into a chaise longue. A hush falls. Is she asleep or merely polite? He murmurs suggestions. You are calm, you are floating. Her breathing deepens. You glance at Alfred. He mouths she's faking it, but you're not so sure. After all, when the mesmerist snaps his fingers, she awakes, blinking, as if she's just returned from a vacation in someone else's brain. Victorians also dabbled in lucid dreaming, though they didn't call it that. Some spiritualists believed one could train the mind to remain alert during dreams, using special affirmations or sleeping in unusual positions. A small group even tried placing magnets under their pillows to align thought currents. Historians still debate whether these practices were grounded in genuine self-experimentation or fueled more by performance and fad. Regardless, they reveal an enduring truth. People have always wanted to master their sleep, to direct, harness, and decode it. You, too, are tempted. That night, you try one of Dr. Forsyth's recommended dream protocols. Avoid meat at dinner, take a lukewarm bath scented with thyme, and repeat the phrase, "I walk gently through the gates of sleep 10 times before closing your eyes." You feel ridiculous, but you try it anyway. What follows is ... strange. You dream of a room inside your own mind, where every bookshelf contains memories you've never had. You hear whispers in Italian, though you do not speak it. You touch a curtain, and it turns to water. And in the morning, you feel no fear, only curiosity. Inspired, you seek out others who have written about dreams. You discover the works of Samuel Taylor Coleridge, who famously dreamt the entire poem Kubla Khan, only to be interrupted by a knock at the door. You read of Thomas de Quincey's opium-fueled nightmares, where cities rose and fell in a single breath. And you find an obscure diary entry from Queen Victoria herself, in which she describes dreaming of a child made of smoke, who whispered truths about Parliament. It seems no one is immune, not poets, not queens. Sleep humbles them all. There's even a fringe theory you find in an old pamphlet, stained with what might be tea or something more nefarious. It suggests that sleep is a form of collective memory, that when we dream, we're tapping into the thoughts of the entire human race, living or dead. You close the pamphlet slowly. If true, that would explain why you sometimes dream of standing in line at a post office you've never visited, behind a man who keeps muttering about taxes in ancient Greek. You begin keeping a dream journal. It's messy, disjointed. Sometimes it's just a single word. Rope, ashes, cake. Other times, whole scenes unfold. You see yourself at a railway station that doesn't exist, hugging someone with your mother's eyes but your own voice. Your insomnia doesn't vanish, but it changes. The fear softens. The anger ebbs. Because now, when sleep arrives, it feels less like a betrayal of your will and more like a riddle you've been invited to solve. You're not always up to the task. Some nights the dreams won't come, but some nights they do. And when they do, you follow them down crooked staircases, through mirrors, across oceans of bed sheets, hoping they'll take you to something more than rest. Maybe understanding, maybe peace, maybe just a place where no one ever asks how you slept last night. Tonight, you light no candles. You simply lie back, close your eyes, and wait. Your room is dark, but it no longer feels menacing. It feels like a stage that's forgotten the script hand is better for it. Still, your sleep remains fragile, elusive. Your brain, ever the overachiever, begins crafting excuses. What if it's the bed, the linens, the furniture arrangement? You sit up. Because now, you remember something from Dr. Forsyth's peculiar lecture. Even the furniture dreams, in its own wooden way. So tonight, you explore the architecture of Victorian sleep. First things first, the bed. Victorian beds are majestic things tall, carved, sometimes canopied like royal altars. They're not designed for comfort so much as symbolism. A statement. You don't just sleep in a Victorian bed, you make a declaration. One of wealth, status, or at the very least, good breeding. The mattress, it's likely stuffed with horsehair, straw, or if you're lucky, feathers. It's more lumpy than luxurious. You roll to the middle because that's where gravity and history meet. Sheets are cotton or linen, crisp and cold. Blankets are woolen, heavy, scratchy. The kind of bedding that discourages both insomnia and movement. Pillows, of course, are a status symbol too. One for the head, one to hug, and one purely decorative, embroidered with unsettling cherubs or Latin scripture. You now suspect your own pillow, with its vaguely threatening lilies, might be sabotaging you on purpose. But let's zoom out. Victorian bedrooms are not minimalist havens. They're filled with stuff, paintings, tapestries, knickknacks. A framed photo of someone whose name you forgot, but whose mustache haunts you.
Dressing screen, small table with a basin, and you're for washing.
Maybe even a writing desk, where you've occasionally scrawled midnight frustrations like, is this sleep? Or am I just bored with my eyes closed? And let's not forget the most intrusive roommate, the clock. Tick, tick, tick. A relentless mechanical metronome of guilt. Each second not spent sleeping feels like failure, served up one tick at a time. You've considered hurling it from the window, but you suspect it would simply land. It's unbroken and continue ticking from beneath the bushes. Interestingly, many Victorians didn't keep clocks in their bedrooms at all. The lucky had servants to wake them. The rest rose with the sun or the milkman's rattle. Clocks were for daytime business, not nocturnal self-loathing. Still, time seeps into the room. Now think of lighting. Gas lamps hiss, candles flicker. But light, even a little, disrupts the body's instinct to wind down. Some Victorians knew this. Heavy velvet curtains weren't just for decorations. They blocked out moonlight and lantern glow from the street. Some households even installed shutters within shutters, creating a cocoon of near-total darkness. Of course, the true masters of Victorian darkness were the undertakers. But let's not wander too far down that corridor. You experiment with the setup. You fluff the mattress with a broom handle. You rotate the bed slightly so your feet don T-point toward. The door, a traditional superstition meant to keep ghosts from dragging you off. Or rearrange the pillows. You even flip the mirror backward, remembering an old housemaid S-tip. Mirrors bounce dreams back into your skull if they re-uncovered at night. And then something shifts. Not dramatically, but enough the bed feels. Less like an exhibit and more like a place to rest. Your body, long used to performing tension, begins to mimic calm. You stop bracing, stop negotiating, simply sink. There's something to be said for environment not as the cure, but as the invitation. A room can't force you to sleep, but it can nudge, whisper, lower its voice. One eccentric essayist you read insists that the ideal sleep environment must contain nothing that insists upon attention, not even art, certainly not poetry. He recommends beige walls, linen curtains, and a single seashell on the nightstand to remind you of silence. Others disagree. A clergyman in Surrey built a bedchamber modeled after an alpine cave walls painted gray. Floor strewn with straw and a faint sound of dripping water piped in via a hidden basin. He claimed it lulled him to a state of pre-human serenity. Another lady you read about lined her room with bookshelves, but only with titles she had already read, lest the temptation to start a new one ruin her resolve. There's even a brief fad for bed tents canopies that enclose the entire bed in fabric, creating a private sleeping cave within the already private room. They're expensive, stuffy, and occasionally flammable, but they make people feel safe. Historians still argue whether Victorian bedrooms were truly restful or just expressions of social pressure. Either way, they reveal a truth we're still wrestling with. Sleep, dose, and tea happen in a vacuum, happen somewhere and that somewhere matters. Tonight, you settle beneath the quilt with fresh eyes. You've removed the ticking clock. Draped a shawl over the mirror, lit a single candle, then blew it out. And in the darkness, your room feels gentler. Not perfect, not silent, but kind. As though the walls themselves have agreed to stop watching you so intently. You fall asleep with your foot brushing the bedpost. A small, strange comfort, as if anchoring yourself to something solid in the soft storm of dreams. This morning you wake up with the peculiar clarity that only follows an unusually good night's sleep or a hallucination. You blink, sit upright, feel your pulse. All is steady, remarkably so. Was it the pillow rearrangement, the mirror shawl? Or perhaps you muse while sipping tepid tea? It was the absence of medical men for a single evening. But the illusion doesn't last. Because at breakfast, Alfred slides across the table, a leaflet creased, tea-stained, and featuring a respectable-looking gentleman with even more respectable sideburns. The headline reads, "Electrify the Sleepless Brain." Welcome to the age of electric sleep experiments, where insomnia meets industrial optimism, and common sense takes a short holiday. Victorians, you quickly learn, had a near-religious fascination with electricity. It was the frontier, the miracle, the invisible thread uniting man, science, and the divine spark. If it could power lamps and locomotives, why not the human brain? Enter electrotherapy, the 19th century answer to insomnia that involved running gentle currents through your body in the name of nerve balance. You are naturally intrigued. You visit the Paracelsus Institute for Bioelectrical Correction, tucked between a hatter's shop and a pawn office. The walls are tiled, the lamps buzz. A brass plaque informs you that the founder, one Dr. Gregory Hawthorne, once revived a lizard using static charge. Promising. We're ushered into a dim room with padded walls and an odd humming sound. The device in question resembles a cross between a harp, a hat rack, and a torture instrument from a medieval museum gift shop. Dr. Hausern calls it the somniograph. He places one hand gently on your temple, the other on the device. You smell ozone somewhere. Something sparks. This will feel like a mild breeze, he says. It feels like licking a copper coin during a thunderstorm. The theory behind the somniograph is simple, if not sound. By delivering small, controlled electrical impulses to the scalp and spine, it would reset the brain's static charge, lulling the patient into a state of pre-dream cognitive quietude. Historians still argue whether these treatments had any measurable effect, or if patients simply passed out from the sheer audacity of the experience. To be fair, it isn't wholly unpleasant. There's a tingle, a fizz, a strange warmth in your fingertips. Your mind doesn't quiet exactly, but it redirects, like a stream nudged by a new stone. That night, you do sleep, though your dreams are oddly mechanical. You walk through a garden of gears. The moon ticks. Someone tries to wind your elbow. God, you don't resist. But the electrical route is not without controversy. Other electropathic devices include belts, gloves, and even pillows wired to deliver tiny shocks at intervals. One pamphlet recommends wrapping copper coils around the feet to ground nervous energy. Another suggests electrifying your bathwater for cleansing both skin and soul. Of course, electricity wasn't the only scientific novelty promising relief. Magnetism had its fans too. You attend a lecture by Lady Prudence Margrave, a self-styled magnetic sleep prophetess, who claims she can align your slumbering patterns with planetary shifts using only polished hematite and a firm whisper. Her parlor is filled with crystals, silk drapery, and an alarming number of cats. She places a small magnet under your pillow and instructs you to sleep with your head pointing due north. That night, you dream of compasses and carrots. It's unclear whether this is progress. Still, there is something captivating about these late Victorian attempts to tame the unseen, to mold the intangible mechanics of consciousness with wires and metals and hope. It's not science by today's standards, but it is a kind of faith. A belief that the body could be tuned, like an instrument, if only one found the right current. And not all experiments were so elaborate. One particularly well-meaning chemist, for example, invents a glow in the dark. Sleep had a felt cap infused with phosphorus, said to calm the nerves by casting a steady lunar shimmer across the upper brow. You try it once, you look like a haunted boiled egg, but you do feel oddly comforted. Back at the Paracelsus Institute, Dr. Hathorn introduces you to the neurosomnolator, a headband fitted with metal knobs meant to stimulate the frontal melancholic cortex. You ask if he's certain such a cortex exists. He pauses, then nods slowly, as if deciding in real time. You wear the headband. You lie on a fainting couch. A soft hum begins, and you float. Not into sleep, quite, but into a quiet corridor of thought you hadn't visited in years. Childhood echoes, the sound of bees against a window pane. It's not sleep, but it's near enough to rest that you mind the difference. In the end, none of these contraptions cure your insomnia, but they do teach you something curious. The human brain will try anything if it's exhausted enough. It will lean into shocks, magnets, and glowing hats, not because they make sense, but because they offer something more potent than comfort. They offer novelty. And when your mind is a locked door and sleep is pacing outside with crossed arms, sometimes a new key, no matter how silly, can jiggle the handle just enough. So tonight, as you wind down, you place a smooth copper spoon beneath your pillow knot, because it will help, but because part of you hopes the absurdity might confuse your brain into submission. You exhale, you close your eyes, and if your dreams tonight involve a lizard riding a magnet-powered bicycle across a field of pillows, well, that's between you and the somniograph. You're halfway through your morning toast when Alfred strolls in. He's holding what appears to be a pair of hand-stitched leather goggles and a bundle of dried herbs tied with string. I've decided, he announces dramatically, that your insomnia is spiritual. You blink, chew, swallow. He sets the bundle down with a flourish. You need a cleansing ritual, something less mechanical, less mustardy. And with that, you are swept into the heady world of Victorian spiritual remedies, a curious blend of folklore, faith, superstition, and just enough exoticism to sell well at apothecaries. It starts with herbs, not the mild, sensible ones like chamomile or lavender, though those have their place. No, tonight we're talking mugwort, valerian, skullcap, passionflower, and something called blessed thistle, which looks like it was pulled directly from the devil's topiary. A local herbalist named Mrs. Penelope Whitfield invites you to her dream preparation circle. It's less a circle and more a triangle of tea-stained doilies, but the intention is clear. She burns herbs in a small ceramic dish. The room smells like someone lit a Victorian medicine cabinet on fire. You're asked to breathe deeply, to visualize your insomnia as a nervous squirrel that must be coaxed from the tree of consciousness. You try. You picture the squirrel. It looks judgmental. The tea is bitter, earthy. It leaves your tongue tingling slightly, but your limbs grow heavy soon after. Not drugged it, just slow. Willing. Victorians often used herbs as more than medicine, they were symbols. Mugwort was for prophecy, Elwarian for quieting hysterical winds. Rosemary, when placed under the bed, was thought to ward off bad dreams and ghosts with opinions. You learn that some households even constructed dream sachets, small embroidered pouches filled with sleep-friendly herbs and tucked beneath pillows. Some were perfumed, some contained cryptic inscriptions like "Let no sprite knock" or "Return me rested." You begin making one. Lavender, rose petals, and just a pinch of crushed nutmeg. You embroider it with clumsy stitches and a tiny moon. The result is lopsided, but heartfelt, and it smells like patience. From herbs, you stumble somewhat literally into rituals. The Victorians loved a good ceremony, especially when it promised to align one's energies or exorcise minor demons. One popular method is the mirror invocation. Stand before a mirror at twilight, hold a lit candle, whisper your sleep wish 3 times, then blow out the flame without blinking. You try this. You blink halfway through and spend the next 10 minutes unsure whether you've doomed yourself or merely smudged your intentions. There's also the salt circle, a gentle one, drawn just beneath your bed. Not to trap spirits, but to remind the body of sacred boundaries. Alfred suggests using sugar instead, but you don't need ants in insomnia. Some spiritualists go further. You attend a hosted by the impeccably named Madame Evangeline Mirth, who claims she can summon the peaceful dead, to share their secret slumber techniques. The room is dark, incense burns, a table levitates slightly, or maybe it's just wobbly. One spirit allegedly interrupts to complain about the draft. Another suggests warm milk. You leave unconvinced but surprisingly calm. Then there's astrology, which during this era isn't just for predicting marriages or harvests. It's a tool for decoding sleep, your chart. Madame Mirth tells you, reveals a Mars-dominant night house. Translation: your inner fire resists surrender. She recommends a small garnet under your mattress to absorb excess will. You find one, you place it. You dream that night of rowing across a lake of wine. Historians still argue whether these practices offered real solace or simply filled the gap where medicine had failed. But many Victorians believed deeply that the soul needed tending alongside the body. That insomnia was sometimes a symptom of being out of sync with unseen thing stars, spirits, or the quiet voice of intuition. One diary you discover belongs to a widower who swore that each night before sleep he wrote a short note to his departed wife, then burned it in the hearth, releasing his thoughts into smoke. He claimed it was the only thing that settled his breath enough to rest. You try it. You write something simple, a thought you've been carrying all week. You fold it, place it on a saucer, and light a match. As it curls and turns to ash, something in your chest unclenches. No miracle follows. No sudden sleep. But you do feel lighter. Not all rituals work. One old farm wife insists you must sleep with a cracked egg under your bed to absorb midnight phantoms. You do. The smell by morning convinces you to skip that one going forward. Another suggests brushing your hair 33 times before bed. 1 stroke for each blessed hour, she says. You have no idea what constitutes a blessed hour, but your scalp feels fantastic. By now, your nightstand has become a small altar. Mugwort sachet, garnet stone, tiny feather, sprig of rosemary, and a handwritten note that simply reads, "Try again," at each night you do. What these rituals offer, perhaps more than anything else, is permission to stop fighting. To imagine that rest can be invited, not forced. That sleep is less a conquest than a conversation. One that requires a little magic, a little meaning, and a lot of quiet repetition. Tonight you lie back, breathe deeply, no leeches, no wires, just a room filled with soft symbols and the faint scent of herbs. And as your mind begins its familiar spiral, you reach beneath the pillow, touch the sachet, and whisper to yourself, let no sprite knock, let no doubt linger, let's sleep finally, say yes. It's well past midnight when you wake to the sound of your own heartbeat, thudding like a polite knock on a hollow door. Not panic, just presence, as if your body wants to remind you it's still here, still waiting for you to do something, or stop doing so much. You don't get up, not this time. You simply lie there and think about all the things you've tried, and the one thing you haven't yet dared, doing absolutely nothing at all. No tinctures, no gadgets, no whispering into mirrors or humming to spoons, just ... being tired. But of course, the Victorians couldn't quite leave well enough alone. For a culture that prized restraint, they were oddly obsessed with tracking, measuring, and diagnosing sleep. Tonight, you flip through a slim volume, On the Counting of Slumbering Breaths by Dr. Alonzo Meriwether. It details a meticulous method of quantifying rest, from eyelid flutter rates to dream-induced chin twitches. Victorians loved their sleep journals. Some wrote nightly entries, tracking hours slept, interruptions, even dream themes. Others employed servants to note sleep duration. One wealthy widow even hired a sleep observer to sit silently at the foot of her bed and record movements of practice, that is. Frankly, both committed and profoundly creepy. In your own efforts to log your nights, you attempt a simplified version, a line a night, jotted in half-light. Some recent gems include, fell asleep at 3:12 a.m. after yelling at the wardrobe, dreamt I was bread, woke up craving jam, no sleep. Practice breathing like an abandoned bellows. Still, something about the act of observing yourself so intently feels counterproductive. Historians still argue whether this obsessive self-monitoring helped or hindered Victorian insomniacs. Some suggest that it created a loop of anxious perfectionism. Every sleepless night was not just frustrating but recorded failure. Others believe it gave a sense of control in an era of unpredictable health and even more unpredictable mattresses. You begin noticing how often insomnia appears in Victorian literature not as a condition, but a character trait. The sensitive artist, the haunted widow, the overworked clerk. Sleeplessness was both a burden and a badge of intellect, a sign that your mind was simply too brilliant or too broken to shut off. Lord Byron famously said, "Sleep hath no joy for me." You wonder if he would have changed his tune had someone handed him a mug of warm valerian root tea and a lavender pillow. Charles Dickens, a lifelong insomniac, would reportedly walk the London streets for hours in the dead of night, often composing whole scenes in his head. You try that once? The streets are silent, your boots echo. Pass a bakery with a faint smell of yeast and fire. You don't write any novels, but you do feel oddly alive. Then there are the medical casebooks, detailed logs of sleep conditions recorded by Victorian physicians. These range from the tragic complete insomnia ending in collapse, to the bizarre woman who claimed she could only sleep under her dining table, to the gently comical a man convinced he could only dream in French, though he spoke none while awake. You feel kinship with all of them, and yet the more you read, the clearer it becomes. The act of trying to sleep harder, longer, better may be the very thing that keeps you from it. Victorians didn't yet have a word for sleep anxiety, but they suffered from it nonetheless. They layered their nights with expectations, moral, medical, mystical. Sleep became a test. They were always in danger of failing. Sound familiar? So tonight, you try something radical. You stop trying. You give yourself full permission not to sleep. You lie back. Let your thoughts drift like pages caught in a breeze. You notice the scratch of the sheet against your ankle, the faint sound of wind pressing at the window panes, the scent of rosemary still lingering from your sachet. You do not force quiet. You simply let noise settle. You think about how many humans have stared into darkness across centuries, kings and castles. Sailors on ships, monks in stone, cells none of them sure whether sleep would come. And yet, here we all still are. You begin to accept that some nights are for sleeping and others are for listening. You imagine the clock no longer ticking but breathing. You imagine your pillow as a small raft drifting through a dreamless ocean. And then you stop imagining altogether. There's no epiphany, no lullaby. No phosphorescent angel descending with a sleep cure etched on her wings. But there is softness and a kind of yielding. And without quite noticing, you sleep. Not because you earned it, not because you've tricked your body with voltage or valerian, because for once, you simply allowed it. It's raining. Not a storm, just a slow, deliberate tapping, like the sky is lightly drumming its fingers on your window pane. You don't mind? In fact, you find yourself grateful. Because this morning, as you sit at the edge of your bed with socked feet on the rug, you realize something astonishing. You've been sleeping. Not perfectly, not predictably, but enough. And with that realization comes a new curiosity. Victorians went to such wild lengths to fall asleep. How, once they managed it, did they ensure it was protected? Welcome to the curious world of Victorian sleep hygiene, a concept that didn't yet have a name, but absolutely had a fan base. First, bedtime etiquette. Victorian society, ever obsessed with manners, had unspoken rules around how and when you should prepare for bed. A proper lady might take a brief constitutional around the garden to air the lungs, followed by warm milk and a few pages of scripture or uplifting poetry. Men might retire to their studies, sip port, and ponder matters of economy or the tragic decline of classical Latin. You, tonight, choose neither. You stretch slowly, then hum a sea shanty for no apparent reason. It feels just as dignified. But routines were everything. Some households followed strict pre-sleep rituals, brushing hair exactly 40 times, lighting a specific number of candles, even walking backwards into the bedroom to confuse any lurking spirits. One etiquette book from 1872 insists that sleeping with one S's mouth closed was essential. To avoid vulgar snoring and unseemly open-mouthed repose, another recommends the application of night perfumes, light floral waters dabbed at the wrists and temples, leave to coax dreams into gentleness. You try rose water one evening. The scent reminds you of weddings, raindrops, and something distant you can't quite name. Historians still debate whether these practices were practical or performative, but either way they tell you this: sleep was treated with reverence, not as a nuisance, but as a delicate ceremony. And like any ceremony, it came with tools. One such tool, the bed warmer, a long-handled pan filled with hot coals, slid between the sheets, moments before sleep, to chase off the cold and the ghosts of chilblains past. You borrow one. The result is divine, if slightly singed. Another tool, the nightcap knot. The brandy, though. Yes, that too. But the actual cloth bonnet. Worn to preserve heat, protect hair, and apparently, reduce the risk of midnight vapors. Yours is cotton, a little too large, and makes you look like a drowsy mushroom. You love it. It's also the matter of position. Victorian manuals give conflicting advice. One doctor insists that sleeping on the left side aids digestion and soothes melancholy. Another swears by lying flat on the back, limbs symmetrical, mind at ease. Some recommend changing positions hourly to ensure blood circulation visits all limbs equally.
Ow.
You attempt this once? You wake up tangled in the quilt, face down, hugging a slipper. Clearly your body prefers anarchy. Still there's wisdom in movement. You read about a curious theory from the late 1800s proposing that some insomniacs simply had not yet located their true sleeping orientation. The solution? Rotate the bed 90 degrees weekly until peace is achieved. You try it. East-facing, anxious dreams. North-facing, too cold. West-facing, strangely comforting. South-south is the sweet spot. And then there's waking the other half of sleep that Victorians took just as seriously. Some homes use sun clocks or trained pets to rouse them. One eccentric gentleman in Bath kept a rooster indoors specifically to crow at 6:15 each morning. A lady in Sussex trained her maid to open the curtains exactly 5 minutes after sunrise, whispering, "The world awaits, madam," and then leave silently. You, lacking servants and poultry, settle for a cracked window and the natural call of daylight. It feels human, because somewhere between all the herbs and hats and headbands, you've begun to understand. The rituals matter less than the rhythm. That sleep isn't a destination but a practice, a habit of stillness. A contract renewed each night. Not always signed, but always offered. And the Victorians, bless them, did try. With all their lace and lotions, their brass contraptions and magnetic dreams, They tried to treat sleep not as a failing to be corrected, but a mystery to be approached with grace. You now find yourself doing the same. Your evenings are quieter. Your mind still drifts, but with less urgency. You prepare the room as if welcoming an old friend, coaxing a stranger. Tonight, you light a single candle. Pour warm water into a chipped ceramic bowl. Brush your teeth with mint paste, and wipe the mirror clean with a cloth that smells of lemon oil and old hope. You fluff the pillow, draw the curtain, slip on the nightcap. And when you lie down, you do so not with expectation, but with invitation. Sleep doesn't come immediately, but it does come. It stays a little longer each time. The wind tonight carries something gentle, not a storm, not a chill. Just a hush like the sky exhaling after a long, restless day. You lie in bed, feeling the weight of your quilt, the smooth give of your mattress, and the deep, familiar quiet of a room that no longer feels like a battlefield. It's been a journey. From leeches and lavender to hypnotists and hats, your pursuit of sleep has wandered down every candlelit corridor the Victorians ever dreamed up. And through it all, one lesson rises like mist on a still pond. Sleep is not a trick to be solved. It's a trust to be rebuilt. You sip a small cup of warm barley water, something you never would have tried weeks ago. It tastes faintly like bread and kindness. Outside, the rain taps on the glass. Inside, the air is soft with rosemary, faintly sweet with the last of the night perfume. You've kept up some of the rituals, yet. Not because they work every time, but because they remind you to slow down. The sachet still lives beneath your pillow. The mirror still sleeps behind its shawl. Your notebook now reads more like poetry than complaint. One of your recent entries, slept like a paper boat in calm water, woke slowly, didn't rush to shore. Tonight you take your time, dress carefully. Fold your clothes into something almost ceremonial. You fluff the pillow twice. No more, no less. You turn your head and let your cheek rest on the fabric. The mattress gives a little, then holds. A good balance. And you think of all the people who came before you, sleepless, seeking, stubborn, aristocrats with velvet blinds, bakers with flowers still on their hands, soldiers in trenches, children in lace-trimmed nightshirts, poets staring up at cracked ceilings, all of them chasing the same invisible door. Historians still debate whether the Victorians ever truly slept well, but they certainly tried. And their strange, tender efforts live on in you now. Because somewhere in all that fumbling, all that herbal steam and quiet desperation, they left behind a map. Not one with directions, but with gestures, hints. A soft trail of breadcrumbs that says, light one candle, brush your hair, say goodnight to the mirror, and breathe, so you do. The window is cracked open just a bit. The air smells like wet earth and rosemary. The candle has gone out on its own, a perfect little goodbye. You don't mind? You lie still, eyes closed, hands loose. There's no pressure, no ticking clock, no expectation. Just a gentle wondering. Will sleep come tonight? If it does or doesn't, you know now that rest is not always about unconsciousness. Sometimes it's just being where you are fully. Letting the day melt from your skin. Letting the bed become a raft again. Letting the wind carry you softly. Nowhere in particular. You breathe in, hold, and let go.